What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
If the wipers died suddenly without warning and the age of the mechanism is not so great, the cause, most likely, should be sought in the electrical part, and there is a chance to get away with little blood. But if the brushes over time became slower and slower and the trapeze emitted extraneous sounds when working, the problem is clearly in the mechanical wear and tear, and here you need a complete revision and reassembly. However, there is nothing particularly tricky in the majority of wipers, and any handy car owner with a minimum set of tools can cope with their overhaul. Of course, when you need the car every day, you can't do without a complete replacement of the windshield wiper mechanism with a new one. Analogs are not cheap, originals are immodestly expensive, but there is nothing to do, you have to splurge, because in winter without wipers it is possible to pass safely only from several hundred meters to a kilometer. If finances sing romance and circumstances allow a day or two to ride on public transport or car sharing, you can remove the complete mechanism, bring it home and spreading it on a newspaper on the table in relative comfort, in warmth and with good light, completely reassemble, successfully returning it to workability and resource. So, let's go. For example, let's take the mechanism of canonical design. Yours specifically may differ from it quite significantly in appearance, but absolutely all principles and key nodes are similar. Well, with rare exceptions. Our task is to show that in principle there is nothing fantastically complicated in this node of the car, and that not God's burn pots. The frame is the basis of the mechanism, it contains the bushings for the brush guide axles, and the gearbox with the motor is attached to it. The frame can be welded from several stamped parts or made of tubes with pressed connecting plates. It is not essential. This iron is rough and conditionally eternal. There are no problems with the frame, except in case of a serious accident. The axles move in the bushings, which drive the wiper blades. On one side of the axles there is a cone with splines and a thread for attachment of the guide, and on the other side there are crank-driven levers with spherical heads, ball joints. On these levers, slave motion is transmitted from the master lever, which will be discussed below. Push-pull rods with ball joint bushings installed in the ends. The ball joint bushings in the rod ends are plastic, resilient bushings. They are put on the balls with a small amount of force and snap into place. They are removed in the same way, with overcoming the elasticity of plastic, by picking them up with a screwdriver. Ball joints work with grease, which over time dries out or is washed out. Prevention of the joints is their disassembly, cleaning from the old grease with dirt, either with a brush in gasoline or an old toothbrush with soap and under hot water, and filling with fresh grease. It is better to use something more moist-resistant rather than the popular and ubiquitous Lidl 24, although it will do in an emergency. If the joints are disassembled and assembled with noticeable force, everything is fine, but sometimes they are the cause of inoperability of the trapeze. The plastic bushing breaks off and simply slips off the ball during operation. In this case, the bushings are replaced with new ones. They consist of two parts and snap into each other on both sides of the hole in the rod. Most often they can be purchased as repair parts, or even picked up from some other, more common and or cheaper car models, using the experience of owners of the same cars from thematic forums. For example, on Ford Focus, bushings from VAZ10 family and older are ideal. The axle assemblies themselves are often a source of problems, as they sour almost intentionally. If after removing the rods from the balls of the axle cranks, the axles turn manually with noticeable force, their disassembly is inevitable. This rather simple axial joint can be realized in different ways. In our case, the axle rotates in a bronze graphite bushing, which rarely gives wear and backlash, but is prone to seizure and jamming. In this case, the unit is disassembled, the axle is removed, the axle and bushing are cleaned and lubricated with grease. There is an annular groove inside the bronze bushing grease accumulator. Do not lose the rubber sealing ring, which prevents moisture from entering the axle joint from above in rain and snow. Another solution, also frequently encountered, is a plastic bushing in which the axle rotates. This variant does not jam, but on the contrary, it becomes loose, because the bushing is eaten by dirt and sand. the brushes start to dangle, hit the hood, etc. In such a situation, bushings are changed on different cars. They, again, can be bought as spare parts, or they are made and sent to the suffering forum self-makers if the part is not produced separately. After all the external moving parts have been studded, disassembled, cleaned and lubricated, it is worth looking inside the gear motor. Over the years, it also gets tired, brushes and collector wear out, grease in the worm gear gets stony, contacts of the switch of the single-stroke mode of brushes oxidize. As a rule, disassembly of the gear motor is quite simple, no special tools are required. Motor collector, if it is not eaten to death, slightly cleaned with fine sandpaper, rinse the worm gear from old grease and dirt, shovel the old grease out of the gear housing. Rinse the inside or wipe it dry with cloths, paper towels or rags. Put in new grease. Moisture does not normally get inside the gearbox, so little will definitely work here. Check the condition of brushes and springs, and if the brush length is equal to or less than its width, change it. It is inevitable, alas. You can try to find the initially necessary, or you can buy any inexpensive ones in power tool stores in the spare parts department, and adjust the size by sharpening the brushes with emery cloth or file. But to replace them, as on an electric drill with a screwdriver and tweezers, it is not a fact that it will be possible. The brushes on such motors are often changed only with the help of a soldering iron. Contacts of the contact group, parking brushes, they are necessary for the brushes at a single touch of the paddle switch always. Made a complete cycle forward-backward and stopped strictly in a horizontal position, clean fine sandpaper, 0 left. The cam on the shaft of the idler pinion of the worm gear, which presses on the contact group, do not need to be thickly lubricated. Leave it dry or lubricate, literally touching the oil finger, barely. The grease must not get into the contact. Another crank is mounted on the output shaft of the idler gear of the gearbox. At its end is a double ball, which drives 2 rods, right and left wipers. In our case, this crank, external. But there are designs of windshield wiper mechanisms where the leading crank is internal, hidden in the gearbox housing. There is no technical difference between these solutions, just a matter of implementation. Nevertheless, this element is often the only one in the entire mechanism that requires adjustment after disassembly and assembly. Since the crankarm is mounted on the gearbox output shaft by means of a tapered fit on shallow splines, it can be placed in any position. However, there is only one correct position. For the kinematics of brush movement depends on the position of the crank lever. For understanding, for example, normally the brushes move in the sector from 9 to 12 o'clock according to the conventional dial, where 9 is the parking position and 12 is the topmost position. If the driving lever is fixed on the gearbox shaft 1 hour to the left, the working sector of the brushes will be shifted to the sector from 10 to 13 o'clock. If 1 hour to the right, it will move to the section from 8 to 11 o'clock. Or vice versa, it doesn't matter. It is a mistake to think that this can be corrected by changing the position of the brush leads on the axles, the axle of the drive crank is connected, as we remember, to the contacts of the parking switch. The eccentric cam must open it in a strictly defined position. Therefore, correct installation of the master crankarm is very important. Instructions for its correct installation, as a rule, there are on the internet for any mechanism of windshield wipers. Although there are designs that cannot be assembled incorrectly, there it is enough to repeat the position of the parts marked before disassembly. That's it, the repair is finished. Before the final installation of the mechanism of windshield wipers in place, it is desirable to start by simply connecting the electrical connector and check that everything moves, buzzes smoothly, softly and in a good way still, and make sure that the current consumption of the gear motor without the installed leashes with brushes does not exceed 1 to 2 amperes. If everything is okay, screw everything on and put the wipers back on. In conclusion, understanding why windshield wipers may fail is essential for maintaining safety on the road. Whether it's due to worn-out blades, a faulty motor, or electrical issues, recognizing the signs early can save you time and money. Regular maintenance and timely repairs can ensure your wipers function effectively when you need them most. Remember, a clear view is crucial for safe driving, so don't hesitate to address any wiper issues promptly. Thank you for watching, and drive safely.